I'm Eden, 29, standing at my grandmother Eleanor's funeral, watching my estranged family across the cemetery. 5 years ago, they accused me of stealing family heirloom jewelry worth thousands, disowning me without hearing my side. Now, with proof of my innocence in my purse, I'm frozen, wondering if I should approach them. Truth has a way of surfacing even after 5 years of silence and pain. If you're watching this story, I'd love to know where you're viewing from. Take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Have you ever been wrongfully accused of something? Let me know in the comments below. I grew up in Beacon Hill, one of Boston's most prestigious neighborhoods, in a Georgian colonial home that looked perfect from the outside, much like my family tried to appear. The Lawrence name carried weight in Boston's social circles, thanks to my father Richard's successful law practice and my mother Margaret's tireless social climbing. From charity galas to country club memberships, appearances were everything to the Lawrences. As the middle child between my older brother Nathan and younger sister Zoe, I quickly learned my place in the family hierarchy. Nathan was the golden child, following perfectly in our father's footsteps. Private school valedictorian, Harvard Law, and the same analytical, calculated approach to life. Zoe was the baby the princess doted on for her beauty and charm, excelling in the social graces my mother valued so highly. And then there was me. From an early age, I questioned everything. Why we needed a house with 7 bedrooms for 5 people. Why my mother spent more time with her social committee than with her children. Why my father worked 80-hour weeks for money we already had. These questions weren't welcomed in a family that prized conformity. "Eden, please try to behave appropriately at the Whitmore's dinner party," my mother would say, tugging at my rebellious outfit choices or attempting to tame my curly brown hair into submission. "You represent the Lawrence family. Act like it." Even at 8 years old, I knew I was different. While Zoe played with expensive dolls and Nathan built elaborate model cities, I was outside with my first disposable camera, capturing raindrops on spider webs and the way light filtered through autumn leaves. Photography became my escape, my way of processing a world that never quite made sense to me. "She's too sensitive," I overheard my father telling my mother one night after I'd cried over a bird with a broken wing in our backyard. "She needs to toughen up if she's going to succeed." "She gets it from your side," my mother replied dismissively. "Your sister was the same way before she grew out of it." But I never grew out of it. If anything, my sensitivity deepened as I got older, along with my determination to forge my own path. When Nathan joined the debate team, winning trophies that my parents proudly displayed, I started submitting my photographs to youth art competitions. My first honorable mention certificate was relegated to a drawer in my father's study. "It's a nice hobby, Eden," he said when I showed him. "But let's focus on your grades in subjects that matter." By the time I reached high school, the pattern was firmly established. Nathan was preparing for the Ivy League. Zoe was the popular cheerleader with perfect grades, and I was the odd one out. Artistic questioning and increasingly isolated within my own family. There was one exception. One person who saw me for who I was, my grandmother Eleanor. Unlike her son, my father, Grandma Eleanor, had an artist's soul hidden beneath her proper Boston socialite exterior. She had wanted to be a painter in her youth, but had set aside her dreams to marry my grandfather and fulfill her expected role. I discovered this secret one summer when I was 12, spending a week at her lake house in New Hampshire. While exploring the attic, I found dozens of canvases covered in dust cloths, landscapes and portraits that revealed a talent and passion I'd never known she possessed. "You weren't supposed to find those," she said from the attic doorway, startling me. I remember being afraid I'd get in trouble, but instead she sat beside me on the dusty floor and shared stories about each painting. That day created a bond between us that would only strengthen over the years. "You remind me of myself," she told me. "Except you're braver than I ever was. Don't let them dim your light, Eden." From then on, Grandma Eleanor became my champion. When my parents dismissed my photography, she would ask to see my latest work. She hung my photographs in her study and bought me my first professional camera for my 16th birthday, against my parents' wishes. "She needs to focus on college applications, not artistic distractions," my father had argued. "Richard, the girl has talent," Grandma countered. "Real talent. Something you'd see if you bothered to look." Those confrontations became more frequent as I approached college age. The expectation was clear. I would attend an elite university, preferably with a strong business or pre-law program like Nathan. My dream to study photography at a dedicated art school was met with reactions ranging from dismissal to outright anger. "We don't spend $30,000 a year on Westridge Academy for you to waste your education on something so impractical," my father said during one particularly heated dinner discussion. "Photography isn't a career, Eden," my mother added. "It's something bored housewives do for Instagram." Nathan stayed silent during these arguments, occasionally shooting me sympathetic glances, but never actually defending me. Zoe, 14 at the time, typically sided with our parents, making comments about real jobs that required actual skills. The conflict reached its peak during my senior year when college acceptance letters arrived. I'd been admitted to both Boston University's business program, my parents' choice, and the Rhode Island School of Design's photography program, my dream. The expectation was that I would choose BU without question. But Grandma Eleanor intervened once again. During Sunday dinner at her house, as my parents pressured me about BU, she tapped her crystal water glass with her silver spoon, commanding attention the way only she could. "I've decided to establish a college fund for Eden," she announced, "specifically for her to attend art school should she choose to." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face reddened. My mother's smile froze, and I felt a surge of hope so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. "Mother, we've already discussed Eden's education," my father finally said. "BU has an excellent program that will give her real opportunities." "And RISD will give her different opportunities," Grandma replied firmly. "One's aligned with her actual talents and interests. The money is already set aside, Richard. It's not up for discussion." That was the first time I saw my grandmother's true power within the family dynamic. As the widow of a successful investment banker and the controller of a significant family trust, she held financial influence that even my father couldn't override. He fell silent, seething, but unable to contradict her. I chose RISD, of course. The next 4 years created an even wider gulf between me and my immediate family. While Nathan graduated from Harvard Law with honors and Zoe became high school valedictorian and headed to Yale, I thrived in the creative environment of art school. My photography began receiving recognition in student exhibitions, and I developed a distinct style focusing on intimate portraits that revealed hidden aspects of my subjects' personalities. My parents attended exactly one of my student showcases, standing awkwardly among the artistic crowd, clearly uncomfortable. My mother examined each photograph with a critical eye. "They're all so dark," she commented. "Don't you take any happy pictures?" My relationship with my family settled into a distant but functional pattern. I visited on major holidays and occasional Sundays, weathering the subtle criticisms and pointed comparisons to my siblings' achievements. Grandma Eleanor remained my steadfast ally, often visiting me in Providence to see my latest work and take me to lunch at her favorite seaside restaurant. "You're finding your voice," she told me during one of these visits, examining a series of portraits I'd created of elderly couples. "These have something many technically perfect photographs lack: heart." After graduation, I moved into a small apartment in Boston's South End, far enough from Beacon Hill to have independence, but close enough to maintain family connections, particularly with my grandmother. I began building a portfolio, taking freelance jobs, photographing events and portraits, while developing my fine art photography on the side. It wasn't the life my parents had envisioned for me, but it was mine. I was making just enough to pay my bills doing work I loved and slowly building a reputation in Boston's art community. I thought we'd reached a kind of uneasy truce. They disapproved of my choices but had accepted they couldn't control me. I had no idea that everything would shatter during that fateful Thanksgiving 5 years ago. The Lawrence family. Thanksgiving was always a formal affair. While other families might enjoy casual gatherings with football on TV and paper plates, our celebration involved fine china crystal glasses and conversation carefully steered away from anything too personal or controversial. That year was no different on the surface, though I sensed an undercurrent of tension from the moment I arrived. "Eden, darling, so glad you could join us." My mother greeted me at the door, air kissing near my cheeks. Her eyes flickered with disapproval at my outfit, a vintage dress I'd found at a thrift store paired with my favorite worn leather boots. "Everyone's in the living room. Do try to mingle before dinner." The living room was filled with the usual suspects: my father's law partners, my mother's social committee friends, and a few distant relatives who appeared only on holidays. Nathan stood near the fireplace, deep in conversation with my father and two older men I recognized from the firm. Zoe, home from her sophomore year at Yale, was charming, a group of my mother's friends looking perfect in an expensive-looking navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "There's my artist granddaughter," Grandma Eleanor called from her favorite armchair when she spotted me. At 86, she remained regal and sharp-minded, though I noticed she seemed frailer than during our lunch just a month earlier. "Come tell me about your latest project." I gratefully escaped to her side, aware of the glances following me across the room. For the next hour, I sat with my grandmother, showing her photos on my phone and soaking in her genuine interest. We were discussing an upcoming gallery submission when the dinner bell rang. The dining room gleamed with Thanksgiving splendor, the table extended to its full length and set with the best silver and china autumn floral arrangements placed at strategic intervals, and candles casting a warm glow over everything. I found my assigned seat between a distant cousin and one of my father's younger associates, as far from the main family members as possible while still at the same table. Dinner proceeded with the usual formality: my father carving the turkey with surgical precision, my mother directing the staff in serving each course, and conversation flowing in carefully controlled channels. I answered polite questions about my photography business, always framed as a business, never as art, and deflected inquiries about when I might move on to something more substantial. It was during dessert, pumpkin pie with homemade whipped cream, that Grandma Eleanor tapped her glass much as she had years ago when announcing my college fund. "I have an announcement to make," she said, her voice thin but authoritative. All conversation ceased immediately. "As you all know, I've been going through some of my possessions lately, thinking about what should go to whom." My mother straightened in her chair, suddenly alert. Grandma Eleanor had a substantial jewelry collection, including several museum-worthy pieces from the Art Deco era and family heirlooms dating back generations. The distribution of these treasures had been a source of speculation for years. "I've decided that my jewelry collection should go to Eden." Grandma continued, looking directly at me. "Her artistic eye will appreciate the craftsmanship in ways others might not, and I know she'll honor the stories behind each piece." The silence that followed was thick with shock. I felt my cheeks flush as all eyes turned to me, some curious, others openly resentful. My mother's smile had disappeared entirely, and my father's jaw had tightened in that way that always signaled his displeasure. "Mother," he finally said, "are you certain that's wise? Some of those pieces are extremely valuable. Perhaps they should stay within the direct family line." The implication that I wasn't direct family or wouldn't keep the pieces in the family stung, but Grandma didn't miss a beat. "Eden is direct family, Richard," she replied coolly. "And I've made my decision. The papers are already with my lawyer." Zoe's voice cut through the tension, sweet, but with an edge. "But Grandma, you always said I looked just like great-grandmother Beatrice. I thought her emerald set would come to me someday." "There will be plenty for everyone in my estate, Zoe," Grandma said firmly. "But the jewelry collection goes to Eden. It's decided." The conversation eventually moved on, but the damage was done. For the remainder of the evening, I felt the chill from my immediate family members. My mother barely spoke to me. My father was brusquely polite, and Zoe avoided me entirely. Only Nathan made any effort at normalcy, asking about an upcoming exhibition, as we helped clear the dessert plates. I stayed overnight in my old bedroom as the dinner had run late, and I'd had 2 glasses of wine. The house felt eerily quiet as I prepared for bed, the familiar surroundings both comforting and alienating at once. I fell asleep thinking about Grandma's surprising announcement, uncertain whether to feel honored or worried about the resentment it had clearly sparked. The next morning, I was awakened by shouting. Disoriented, I stumbled out of bed and opened my door to find the hallway filled with family members in various states of distress. My mother spotted me first, her face contorted with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. "You," she said, pointing a trembling finger at me. "How could you do this to your own family?" "Do what?" I asked, genuinely confused and still half asleep. "What's happening?" "Don't play innocent," my father interjected, his attorney voice in full effect, the cold, precise tone he used in courtrooms. "The jewelry is missing. All of it. From Mother's safe." It took several seconds for his words to register. "Grandma's jewelry is gone, but I don't understand what that has to do with me." "It has everything to do with you," my mother snapped. "She announced she's giving it all to you, and suddenly it disappears overnight. Do you think we're stupid?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "You think I took it? That's insane. I would never—" "Save it, Eden," my father interrupted. "Mother is devastated. She trusted you, and this is how you repay her." I looked past them to where my grandmother stood in the doorway of her bedroom, looking small and confused, supported by our housekeeper, Maria. "Grandma, tell them I wouldn't do this," I pleaded. I don't know what to think," she said, her voice wavering. "The safe was secure. Only family knows the combination." "Exactly," my mother said triumphantly. "Only family. And you were the only one with motivation to take it now before the legal transfer." "That's ridiculous," I protested, increasingly desperate as I saw the accusations solidifying in everyone's eyes. "I don't even know the combination to the safe." "Don't lie to us," my father said coldly. "Mother showed you the safe last year when she wanted your opinion on the vintage Cartier pieces." It was true that Grandma had shown me her jewelry collection, but I had never paid attention to the safe combination. I'd been focused on the stunning craftsmanship of the pieces themselves, photographing several of them for a personal project on family heirlooms. "I didn't memorize the combination," I insisted. "And I was in my room all night. Ask Maria. She brought me tea before bed." Maria looked down, avoiding my eyes. "I brought tea to several rooms, miss. I cannot say who was where all night." The next hour passed in a blur of accusations and denials. My room was searched, my overnight bag emptied onto the bed, my car checked thoroughly. No jewelry was found, but the absence of evidence did nothing to change my family's certainty of my guilt. "Perhaps she's already hidden it somewhere," my mother suggested, "or passed it to an accomplice." "An accomplice?" I repeated incredulously. "Listen to yourself. You're talking about me like I'm some master criminal." "We know you've been struggling financially," my father said, his tone coldly analytical. "Your last art show barely covered your expenses. You mentioned your rent increasing just last month at Sunday dinner." "So because I'm not rich, I must be a thief," I was shouting now, tears of frustration streaming down my face. "I would never steal from Grandma. Never." Just as the argument reached its peak, Nathan entered the room, his expression grim. "I found something," he said, holding up a crumpled receipt. "It was in the pocket of Eden's old coat in the hall closet." My father snatched the paper, his eyes scanning it quickly. "A pawn shop receipt," he announced, "dated 2 weeks ago." "Let me see that," I demanded, grabbing for the paper. It was indeed a receipt from Boston Pawn and Loan, but I had never seen it before. "This isn't mine. I haven't used that coat in months. Someone planted this." "Sure they did," Zoe said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was quiet, but carried clearly through the room. "Just like someone planted you standing outside Grandma's room at 2 a.m. last night." All eyes turned to my sister. "I got up to use the bathroom," she continued. "I saw you coming from the direction of Grandma's suite. You looked nervous. I thought maybe you were checking on her, but now—" "That's a lie," I gasped, staring at my sister in disbelief. "I never left my room last night. You're making this up." But the damage was done. The receipt, Zoe's false testimony. It all painted a picture I couldn't defend against. My own sister had just delivered the final nail in my coffin. "I think we need to call the police," my father said, reaching for his phone. "Richard, please," Grandma Eleanor intervened weakly. "Let's handle this as a family." "She's a thief, Mother," he replied firmly. "Those pieces are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a felony." A sickening realization washed over me. They were really going to do this. My own family was ready to have me arrested based on circumstantial evidence and lies. No one was even considering my side of the story. No one was giving me the benefit of the doubt. "I'm your daughter," I said, my voice breaking. "How can you think I would do this? You stopped being part of this family when you decided to steal from your own grandmother," my mother said icily. "I want you out of this house, now." I looked from face to face, searching for any sign of doubt, any willingness to hear me out. My father stood rigid with righteous anger. My mother's face was a mask of disgust. Nathan looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Zoe wouldn't meet my eyes. And Grandma Eleanor, the one person who had always believed in me, looked confused and heartbroken, uncertainty clouding her usually clear gaze. In that moment, I knew I had lost. Without a word, I gathered my scattered belongings, shoving them haphazardly into my overnight bag. No one spoke as I dressed quickly and grabbed my car keys. At the bedroom door, I turned back one last time. "I didn't take anything. Someday you'll realize that, and you'll have to live with what you did to me today." I walked out of my childhood home with nothing but my camera, my phone, and a small bag of clothes. Behind me, I heard my father on the phone, not with the police, but with his bank, instructing them to cancel the credit card he had co-signed for me in college. My final tie to the Lawrence family severed with a phone call. As I drove away, tears blurring my vision, I had no idea that it would be 5 long years before I would see any of them again. The first 2 weeks after being disowned were the hardest of my life. I returned to my apartment only to find the locks changed. My parents had contacted my landlord claiming I was involved in criminal activity and paid to break my lease. My few possessions had been boxed and left with the building superintendent excluding anything of significant value, like my computer and professional camera equipment, which mysteriously couldn't be located. With less than $800 in my personal bank account and nowhere to go, I lived in my car, a 12-year-old Honda Civic that had been my college graduation present. I parked in different locations each night, terrified of being discovered. The YMCA membership I used for occasional workouts became my lifeline, providing daily showers and a temporary escape from the confines of my vehicle. I tried calling everyone in my family. My parents' numbers went straight to voicemail. Nathan texted once, "Give back the jewelry and we can fix this." Zoe blocked me entirely. Only Grandma Eleanor responded with a brief, heartbreaking message. "I want to believe you, but they won't let me see you. Please return the items if you have them. I love you regardless." The isolation was suffocating. Friends from art school offered couches, but I was too ashamed to explain what had happened. How could I tell them my entire family believed I was a thief, that my own sister had lied to incriminate me, that I had been cut off completely, as if my 24 years as a Lawrence had never existed? One particularly cold night, parked behind an abandoned warehouse, I contemplated ending it all. The betrayal was too much to bear, not just the false accusation, but the ease with which my family had believed the worst of me. Without Grandma Eleanor's support and with no way to prove my innocence, what future did I have? It was pure chance that led me to the Daily Grind, a small cafe in Somerville. Desperate for warmth and Wi-Fi to job hunt, I spent my dwindling cash on bottomless coffee and stayed from opening until closing. The owner, Grace Chen, noticed me returning day after day, looking increasingly disheveled. "You're here even more than I am," she commented on my 5th consecutive day, sliding into the booth across from me. "And I own the place." Something about her kind eyes and direct manner broke through my carefully constructed walls. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything: the false accusation, the family betrayal, my current homelessness. "You can't keep living in your car," she said when I finished. "I have a storage room upstairs I've been meaning to clean out. It's not much, but there's space for a futon. You can stay until you get back on your feet." "I can't accept charity," I protested weakly. "Then work for me," she countered. "I need help with the morning shift, and you need a job that pays cash until you sort out your situation." That night, I slept on a narrow futon in a room filled with coffee shop supplies and Grace's overflow belongings. It was the best sleep I'd had in weeks. Grace became more than an employer. She became the family I had lost. At 52, she had the practical wisdom of someone who had weathered her own storms. A first-generation Chinese American, she had built her business from nothing after leaving an abusive marriage in her 30s. "Family isn't always blood," she told me one night as we closed the cafe together. "Sometimes it's the people who show up when everyone else walks away." Under Grace's guidance, I slowly rebuilt my life. The morning shift at the cafe provided steady income and free meals. I picked up photography gigs using a secondhand camera I purchased from a pawn shop, ironically shooting engagement photos and small events for cash. Within 3 months, I had saved enough to rent a tiny studio apartment, barely larger than a closet, but mine. The emotional recovery was slower than the practical one. I suffered from anxiety and depression jumping at the sight of anyone who resembled my family members on the street. Boston suddenly felt too small, too dangerous. I changed my appearance, cutting my long brown hair into a short bob and dyeing it black, switching from contacts to thick-framed glasses. It wasn't just about avoiding recognition. It was about becoming someone new, someone who hadn't been betrayed by those who should have loved her most. Therapy became essential to my survival. The community health center offered sliding scale sessions, and my therapist helped me process the trauma of false accusation and family abandonment. She called it complex grief, mourning people who were still alive but lost to me. "You're grieving not just the relationships, but the idea of family you thought you had," she explained. "The security, the unconditional love, the belief that they would always be there for you." Through therapy, I began to understand how I had always been the family scapegoat, the one who didn't fit the Lawrence mold, who challenged their values simply by existing authentically. The jewelry accusation wasn't the cause of my exile, it was merely the culmination of years of being the family outsider. I tried to move forward, focusing on rebuilding my photography career from scratch. Without my portfolio or professional equipment, I started again with simple portrait sessions, gradually saving for better gear. I created a new website under the name Eden Lawrence Chen, taking Grace's surname as a tribute to the woman who had saved me and as a symbolic break from my past. Despite my efforts to create a new life, I couldn't help monitoring my family from afar. Through public social media accounts and Boston Society pages, I watched them continue as if I had never existed. Nathan made partner at my father's firm and married a state senator's daughter in a lavish ceremony covered by Boston Magazine. Zoe graduated from Yale and began working for a prestigious consulting firm in New York. My parents appeared in charity gala photos, smiling as if they didn't have a daughter living in poverty across town. The hardest news to bear was about Grandma Eleanor. Through careful stalking of my mother's Instagram account, I learned that my grandmother's health was declining. Photos showed her looking increasingly frail at family gatherings, eventually appearing with a wheelchair, then disappearing from images altogether. The thought that she might die believing I had betrayed her was unbearable. I considered reaching out directly many times, perhaps visiting her home when my parents wouldn't be there, but the fear of rejection, or worse, having them call the police on me, always held me back. Instead, I sent anonymous flowers on her birthday each year, hoping she might somehow know they were from me. 3 years into my exile, just as I was finally establishing some stability, an unexpected message appeared in my Facebook inbox. It was from Maria, our former housekeeper who had worked for my family for over 15 years. "Miss Eden," the message read, "I need to speak with you about what happened. I have information." My hands shook as I replied, arranging to meet her at a small park far from my family's neighborhood. For 3 years, I had clung to the hope that somehow, someday, the truth would emerge. Could this finally be my chance at vindication? Maria looked older than I remembered when she arrived at our meeting spot, the stress of the years evident in the new lines around her eyes. She hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I should have spoken up sooner," she said as we sat on a bench overlooking the pond. "But I was afraid. For my job, for my family back home who depend on my income." "Spoken up about what?" I asked, my heart racing. Maria took a deep breath. "The night of Thanksgiving, after everyone went to bed, I was finishing some cleaning in the kitchen. I saw Miss Zoe and her boyfriend, that Tyler boy, sneaking around near your grandmother's suite. They were whispering, looking nervous. I thought maybe they were, looking for privacy." You saw Zoe near Grandma's room. My mind was spinning with implications. Did you tell my parents? No, Maria admitted, looking down. The next morning when the jewelry was discovered missing, I was going to say something, but before I could, Mr. Richard called me into his study. He said there were budget cuts that they needed to reduce staff. He gave me a generous severance package but asked me to leave immediately. I had 3 children in college, Miss Eden. I couldn't risk losing that money. The pieces were falling into place. They fired you to keep you quiet, I realized aloud. But why are you telling me this now after all this time? My children have graduated. I'm retiring next year and moving back to Guatemala, she explained. And I saw your grandmother last month at the hospital where my sister works as a nurse. She looked so sad, Miss Eden. She asked about you. Tears filled my eyes at the thought of Grandma still thinking of me. Do you think Zoe took the jewelry? I don't know for certain, Maria replied. But I've worked for your family since Miss Zoe was a baby. She was always tricky, taking things and blaming the staff, manipulating situations to get what she wanted. It wasn't concrete proof, but it was the first confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that someone else had seen something suspicious that night. Maria promised to help me investigate further to see if we could find evidence of what really happened to the jewelry. But a week later, before we could meet again, I received the devastating news that Maria had suffered a massive heart attack and passed away in her sleep. My one potential ally gone. The brief hope I'd felt was replaced by a renewed determination to clear my name on my own. I began methodically visiting pawn shops around Boston, showing them photos of my grandmother's distinctive jewelry pieces that I'd taken during our photography sessions. Most shop owners were dismissive or suspicious, but at the 12th shop, an older man recognized one of the pieces. Yeah, I remember this one, he said, tapping a photo of an Art Deco diamond and sapphire bracelet. Unusual setting. Came in about 3 years ago. Pretty piece. 3 years ago, I repeated, my heart racing. Not 5 years ago. Definitely not 5, he confirmed. Would have been spring 3 years back. Young couple brought it in. I offered them $6,000, which was lowballing, frankly, but they seemed desperate. This was a crucial revelation. The jewelry had been pawned 3 months after I'd been accused, when I was already living in my car, cut off from my family. There was no way I could have done it. The shop owner couldn't give me names due to client confidentiality, but his description of a preppy blonde girl and nervous-looking guy with a Yale sweatshirt pointed directly to Zoe and her boyfriend Tyler. It wasn't proof that would stand up in court, but it was enough to fuel my investigation. Finding Tyler was my next challenge. Zoe had dated him briefly during her freshman year at Yale, but they had broken up shortly after the Thanksgiving incident. Through careful social media searching, I discovered he now worked as a bartender at an upscale hotel in Back Bay. Disguised in my new look, short black hair and glasses he wouldn't recognize, I visited the bar on a quiet Tuesday evening. Tyler hadn't changed much, still handsome in a conventional way, with the easy charm that had attracted my sister. "What can I get you?" he asked as I slid onto a bar stool. "Information," I replied, watching his expression carefully as I removed my glasses. "About what really happened to my grandmother's jewelry 5 years ago." Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by panic. "Eden, I don't know what you're talking about. I think you should leave." "I know you and Zoe pawned the bracelet 3 years ago," I said quietly. "I have proof. What I don't know is why you waited so long to sell it, or where the rest of the collection is." "Listen, I can't talk about this here," he whispered urgently, glancing around at the nearly empty bar. "I could lose my job." "You could face criminal charges for theft and fraud," I countered. "My family thought I took that jewelry. They disowned me, Tyler. I lost everything." Guilt flashed across his face. "I didn't know it would go that far. It was Zoe's idea. She said you'd just get in trouble with your parents, maybe be cut off for a while. I never thought they'd completely disown you." "But you let it happen," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "You let me take the blame while you and Zoe held on to stolen jewelry for months." Tyler's hands trembled slightly as he wiped down the bar. We panicked. The original plan was to take it that night and pawn it immediately. But then everyone was searching for it and your father was talking about police reports. Zoe hid the jewelry in her dorm room until things died down. And the pawn shop receipt in my coat pocket. Zoe planted it, he admitted. She found an old receipt from when she pawned a watch I gave her and put it in your coat while everyone was having breakfast. I felt sick at the calculated cruelty of it all. Why? I asked. Why would she do that to me? Tyler looked genuinely uncomfortable. She was jealous. Always had been, according to her. Your grandmother choosing you for the jewelry collection was the last straw. Plus, she had gambling debts from poker games at Yale, serious ones. So she destroyed my life to pay her gambling debts, I said flatly. Look, I'm sorry, Tyler said, lowering his voice as a couple entered the bar. I really am. I broke up with her a few weeks after we pawned the first piece. The whole thing made me sick. But by then, what could I do? Come forward and implicate myself. I left the bar with Tyler's contact information and a promise that he would speak with me again. Over the next several weeks, I built my case methodically, recording a phone conversation with Tyler where he admitted their guilt-gathering receipts from the pawn shops where pieces had been sold, constructing a timeline that proved I couldn't have taken the jewelry. But the most shocking revelation came during my final conversation with Tyler. The worst part, he confessed, is that your family knows the truth now. Zoe confessed to your parents 2 years ago when she was caught trying to pawn the emerald necklace. She was drunk crying, said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. They know, I whispered, stunned. They've known for 2 years that I was innocent. According to Zoe, they decided it would be too complicated to reopen the whole situation. They made her promise never to speak of it again. They chose to protect her and leave you out in the cold. This betrayal cut deeper than the original accusation. They had known I was innocent, known their golden daughter was the real thief, and they had chosen to maintain the lie rather than acknowledge their mistake and make amends. Armed with evidence and burning with righteous anger, I consulted with a lawyer friend I had met through my photography work. Lisa specialized in family law and reviewed my case pro bono. You have enough for a civil suit, she concluded after examining my evidence. Defamation, emotional distress, possibly even conversion of property since they essentially stole your photography equipment. But lawsuits are expensive and emotionally draining. Are you sure this is the path you want to take? It was a valid question. After 5 years of rebuilding my life, did I want to dive back into the toxic dynamics that had nearly destroyed me? Was legal vindication worth reopening wounds that had finally begun to heal? As I wrestled with this decision, fate intervened once again. An email arrived from my grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Hoffman, requesting a meeting at his earliest convenience. With trepidation, I agreed to see him the following day. Miss Lawrence, he greeted me formally in his downtown office. Thank you for coming. I've been attempting to locate you for some time. I'm not hard to find, I replied. My family simply hasn't been looking. He acknowledged this with a slight nod. I'm afraid I have difficult news. Your grandmother Eleanor Lawrence has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Her doctors give her 6 months at most likely less. Though I had suspected Grandma's health was failing, the confirmation hit me hard. I'm sorry to hear that, I managed. But I'm not sure why you're telling me this. My family made it clear 5 years ago that I'm no longer a Lawrence. Because despite what transpired, you remain in your grandmother's will, he explained. More significantly, she has requested to see you. She's aware of certain revelations regarding the missing jewelry. She wants to make amends before it's too late. My carefully constructed defenses began to crumble. She knows I didn't take it. Yes, Mr. Hoffman confirmed. The truth came to light approximately 2 years ago. Your grandmother was devastated to learn what really happened, and even more so to discover that your parents chose to maintain the false narrative. A million emotions crashed through me. Vindication, grief, rage, and underneath it all a small flicker of hope that at least one member of my family had wanted to make things right. Will you see her? Mr. Hoffman asked gently. She's quite weak, but she's been asking for you consistently. Despite everything, I couldn't refuse this request. Whatever anger I felt toward my family, Grandma Eleanor had been my champion for as long as I could remember. If these were to be her final months, I wanted her to know I had never betrayed her trust. "Yes," I said finally. "I'll see her. But I won't come to the house. I can't face the rest of them yet." Mr. Hoffman nodded understandingly. "She anticipated that. She suggested her lake house in New Hampshire, just the two of you with her nurse in attendance for medical needs, this weekend if you're available." 3 days later, I drove the familiar route to Lake Winnipesaukee, my emotions in turmoil. The lake house appeared exactly as I remembered, a graceful New England colonial overlooking the water where I had spent so many happy summers as a child. It seemed surreal to be returning after 5 years of exile, like stepping into a previous life. Grandma Eleanor was waiting on the porch bundled in blankets despite the mild spring weather. She looked so much smaller than I remembered her once elegant frame, now frail, her silver hair thin. But her eyes, those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, lit up when she saw me. "Eden," she said, her voice wavering. "My dear girl, you came." I knelt beside her chair, taking her thin hands in mine. "Of course I came. I have so much to apologize for." She began, tears filling her eyes. "I should have believed you. I should have fought harder when they turned against you." "It's not your fault," I assured her, my own tears falling freely. "They fooled everyone." Over the next 2 days, we talked for hours, about the past 5 years, about the truth of what happened, about my new life. I showed her photos of my recent work on my phone, and she praised them with the same genuine enthusiasm she had always shown. We avoided discussing the rest of the family by unspoken agreement, focusing instead on healing the rift between us. On the second evening, as we sat watching the sunset over the lake, Grandma broached the subject we had been avoiding. "Your parents and siblings will be here tomorrow," she said carefully. "I've asked them to come for lunch." I stiffened immediately. "Grandma, I don't think I'm ready." "I know," she interrupted gently, "and I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. But Eden, I'm dying. I don't have time for gradual reconciliations. I need to see my family whole before I go, or at least beginning to heal." Put that way, how could I refuse? This woman had supported me when no one else did, had loved me unconditionally, even when doubts were planted in her mind. If facing my family for a few hours would give her peace in her final months, it seemed a small price to pay. "All right," I agreed reluctantly. "For you, I'll try." The next morning, I woke with a sense of dread that only intensified as the hours passed. By noon, I was physically nauseous with anxiety, pacing the lake house living room while Grandma watched me with concerned eyes. "They're here," she said suddenly, hearing cars on the gravel driveway before I did. "Eden, remember what we discussed. This is about truth and accountability, not revenge." I nodded, taking a deep breath as the front door opened and my family filed in. First my father, then my mother, followed by Nathan, and finally Zoe. They froze in unison when they saw me, a tableau of shock and discomfort. "You didn't tell us she would be here," my mother said to Grandma, her voice tight. "I didn't think I needed to specify that my granddaughter would be at my house," Grandma replied with surprising steel in her voice. "Please, everyone, sit down. Lunch is ready and we have much to discuss." What followed was the most excruciating meal of my life. We sat around the dining table where we had shared countless summer dinners and happier times, now separated by 5 years of lies and betrayal. The conversation remained superficial, carefully steered by Grandma away from contentious topics as we picked at our food. It wasn't until dessert was served that Grandma Eleanor played her hand. "I've asked you all here today because I wanted to announce some changes to my will," she said calmly, as if discussing the weather. My father set down his fork, suddenly alert. "Mother, is this really the time? Your health should be your priority right now." "My priority is setting things right while I still can," she replied firmly. "Eden did not steal my jewelry. We all know that now. Yet she has spent 5 years cut off from her family, struggling to survive while the real culprit has been protected and coddled." All eyes shifted uncomfortably to Zoe, who stared fixedly at her plate. I've amended my will to reflect this injustice. Grandma continued. Eden will inherit this lake house and half of my remaining estate. The other half will be divided among the rest of you contingent upon your participation in a family reconciliation process with a mediator of my choosing. That's outrageous, my mother burst out. You can't hold our inheritance hostage over a family disagreement. A family disagreement, I repeated incredulously, breaking my silence for the first time. Is that what you call falsely accusing your daughter of theft, disowning her, and then continuing the lie for 2 years after you knew the truth? Eden. My father began in his authoritative courtroom voice. What happened was unfortunate, but unfortunate. I interrupted years of hurt boiling over. I lived in my car for 2 weeks. I contemplated suicide. I lost everything, my home, my career, my identity. And when you discovered Zoe was the real thief, you did nothing. You protected her and abandoned me. We didn't know how to reach you, Nathan offered weakly. You didn't try, I countered. I kept the same phone number. I have email. I was living 20 minutes away in Somerville. You could have found me if you wanted to. It wasn't that simple, my father insisted. By then, so much time had passed. We thought it might be kinder to let you continue with your new life rather than disrupting it. Kinder, I echoed. You thought it was kinder to let me believe my entire family thought I was a thief, to let me struggle financially while continuing to support the person who actually committed the crime. I said I was sorry. Zoe finally burst out, tears streaming down her face. I told them I wanted to confess to make it right, but they said it would ruin my future, my career prospects. They said what was done was done. Your future, I said flatly. What about mine? Grandma Eleanor reached over to squeeze my hand. This is precisely why I've structured my will this way, she said. Not as punishment, but as an opportunity for healing. I want this family whole again before I leave it. I want accountability, genuine apology, and reconciliation. The argument continued for hours, cycling through denial, minimization, and finally, as the afternoon wore on, the beginnings of genuine remorse. Nathan was the first to offer a real apology, admitting that he had harbored doubts about my guilt from the beginning, but had been too cowardly to voice them. My parents were more resistant, clinging to justifications and excuses, until Grandma finally said, "Enough. I raised you better than this, Richard. You know what's right. Do it before it's too late." Something in her words, perhaps the reminder of her mortality, finally broke through my father's defenses. "I failed you," he admitted, looking directly at me for the first time. "As a father, as a lawyer committed to justice, as a decent human being. I failed you completely, and I am so deeply sorry." My mother followed suit, her carefully maintained facade crumbling as she acknowledged how her concern for appearances and family reputation had trumped her love for her daughter. "I told myself we were protecting Zoe," she said through tears. "But the truth is admitting we were wrong was too painful. We sacrificed you because facing our mistake was too difficult." Zoe's apology was the most difficult to hear, her description of the jealousy that had festered for years, her impulsive decision to steal the jewelry to pay gambling debts, her panic when the theft was discovered leading to the calculated framing of me. "I never thought they would disown you," she insisted. "I thought you'd be punished, maybe cut off financially for a while. By the time I realized how bad it was, it seemed too late to fix it." I listened to it all, years of hurt and anger washing through me in waves. Part of me wanted to reject their apologies, to make them suffer as I had suffered. But looking at my grandmother, the woman who had taught me about forgiveness and grace, I knew that perpetuating the cycle of hurt would solve nothing. "I don't forgive you yet," I said when they had all finished speaking. "I can't. That will take time if it comes at all. But I'm willing to try, for Grandma's sake and maybe eventually for my own." It wasn't a Hollywood ending with tearful embraces and instantaneous healing. It was messy, painful, and uncertain, much like real life. But as we left the lake house that evening, something had shifted. A door that had been firmly closed for 5 years stood slightly ajar, offering, if not reconciliation, at least the possibility of it. Grandma Eleanor passed away 4 months later, surrounded by family, including me. True to her word, she left me the lake house and half her estate, with the remainder distributed among my parents and siblings, contingent upon their continued participation in family therapy. The money meant little to me compared to the vindication of having my name cleared, not just privately, but publicly. At Grandma's insistence, my father had sent a formal letter to the extended family and their social circle explaining that I had been falsely accused and that Zoe had been the actual culprit. It couldn't undo 5 years of isolation and struggle, but it restored something I had thought lost forever: my truth. 1 year has passed since Grandma Eleanor's funeral, where I stood across the cemetery from my estranged family, proof of my innocence burning a hole in my purse. It's been a year of slow, painful steps toward healing, some forward, some back. The lake house has become my sanctuary, my home base as I rebuild not just my career, but my sense of self outside the shadow of false accusation. I've transformed the property's boathouse into a photography studio, with northern lights streaming through new skylights and reflecting off the lake below. My work has evolved, focusing now on themes of isolation, identity, and redemption. A series titled False Narratives, Portraits of People Who Have Been Wrongfully Accused or Misunderstood, earned me a feature in a prominent photography magazine and a solo exhibition in a respected Boston gallery. The irony isn't lost on me that my greatest professional success has come from the very trauma that nearly destroyed me. There's a certain poetic justice in transforming pain into art, in giving voice to others who have experienced the unique anguish of having their stories rewritten by those with more power. My relationship with my family remains complicated. We attend monthly sessions with Dr. Renata Silva, the family therapist Grandma selected before her death. Progress is uneven. Some sessions end in tears and recrimination, others in tentative understanding. Nathan has made the most sincere efforts to rebuild our relationship regularly, visiting the lake house to help with renovations, and genuinely engaging with my life and work. My parents try in their way, though old patterns die hard. My mother still occasionally makes tone-deaf comments about my career or appearance, then looks surprised when I set a boundary. My father struggles to relinquish control, to accept that our relationship will never return to the patriarchal dynamic he prefers. But they are trying, which is more than I could have hoped for a year ago. Zoe remains the most difficult. Her betrayal cut deepest, and her apologies often seem performative rather than heartfelt. Yet there are moments, like when she recently admitted to still being in therapy for gambling addiction, that glimpses of genuine remorse break through her polished exterior. I don't know if we'll ever be close, but we're learning to occupy the same space without the weight of unspoken accusations between us. As for me, I'm still healing, still discovering who Eden Lawrence is outside the roles assigned to me: scapegoat, exile victim. The most significant change has been my relationship with Grace Chen, who has become the mother figure I always needed. I legally added her surname to mine, a gesture that moved her to tears and formalized what we both already knew: that family transcends blood. The foundation I established with part of Grandma's inheritance, the Eleanor Lawrence Foundation for Arts and Justice, provides grants to artists exploring themes of truth and reconciliation. It's a small way of honoring the woman who believed in me when no one else did, while creating opportunities for others to tell stories that might otherwise go unheard. My personal life has flourished too, in ways I never expected. Alex Morgan, a civil rights attorney I met while researching the False Narratives series, has shown me what healthy love looks like: supportive, respectful, and without the conditional acceptance I grew up with. We're taking things slowly, both of us carrying baggage from our pasts, but there's a solid foundation of trust that I once thought impossible for me to build. This Thanksgiving, exactly 6 years after the accusation that shattered my life, I hosted dinner at the lake house. Not for my biological family, we're not there yet, but for my chosen one, Grace, Alex, my closest friends, and a few subjects from my photography series who have become friends in their own right. As we gathered around Grandma Eleanor's dining table, I felt her presence in the space she loved most, and I hoped she would be proud of the life I'm creating from the ashes of betrayal. The journey hasn't been easy. There are still days when anger threatens to consume me, when the injustice of those 5 lost years feels unbearable. But more often now, I find myself focusing on what I've gained rather than what I lost. Resilience, independence, clarity about who and what truly matters. False accusation and family betrayal broke me in ways I never thought I could survive. The truth coming to light didn't magically heal those breaks. It simply allowed me to stop questioning my own reality, to rebuild on a foundation of vindication rather than doubt. The scars remain, but they've become part of my story rather than the whole of it. If you've ever experienced the particular pain of being disbelieved by those who should have supported you, most know that you're not alone. Your truth matters even when others refuse to see it. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that survival is possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our most painful experiences, and that's a truth worth holding on to.